He told me to shut up. And that's when I realized our relationship was already over.
He said 2 words. Just 2. And everything, 4 years, a shared apartment, weekend routines, inside jokes, all of it, started unraveling in real time. I want to be very clear about something before I tell you this story. I am not a dramatic person. I don't make scenes. I don't send paragraphs. I don't run crying to friends the second something goes wrong in a relationship. If anything, I've spent most of my adult life being too patient, too understanding, too quick to convince myself that whatever I was feeling was probably an overreaction. So when I tell you what happened that night, and what happened after, I need you to understand that what eventually changed in me wasn't dramatic. It was just quiet. And final. My name is Sophie. I'm 27. And until about 6 months ago, I was in a relationship with a man named Ryan. Ryan was 31. We met through work, not directly, but at one of those industry networking events that everyone pretends to enjoy. He was funny and self-assured, and he remembered my name the next day when he emailed me, which honestly felt like a miracle compared to what I was used to. We dated for 4 months before making it official. We moved in together after about 2 years. On paper, we were doing everything right. He was a good partner in a lot of ways. He was generous with money. He showed up when things were hard. He remembered the small things, the anniversary of the day my dad passed, my irrational hatred of mushrooms, the fact that I can't sleep with the closet door open. He paid attention. But there was a thing. There was always a thing. Ryan had a temper. Not a violent temper. I want to be precise about this, because it wasn't that. He never scared me physically. It was more like a low-pressure system. This energy that would build up slowly, and when it released, it was sharp and sudden and cold. A dismissive comment. A cutting remark. The kind of thing that left a mark without leaving a bruise. And I told myself, for a long time, that it was just stress. That he was working a lot. That everyone has a version of this. That I wasn't perfect either. And look, I think most of us have done some version of this. Made excuses for someone we cared about because the alternative, admitting what we were seeing, felt too heavy to deal with. I'm not proud of how long I did it. But I understand why. The night it happened was a Thursday. Not a special Thursday. Not an anniversary or a holiday or a day with any particular weight to it. Just a regular Thursday in October, cold outside, takeout on the coffee table, some show playing in the background that neither of us was really watching. We'd had a long week. Both of us. I was in the middle of a project at work that had been running over deadline for 2 months, and I was exhausted in the specific way that makes everything feel slightly too loud. Ryan had been stressed about something with his job, a restructure that had been rumored for weeks and was making everyone on his team anxious. We were both tired. Both fraying a little at the edges. That's important context. We started talking, or I started talking, about the project I was working on. I'd been carrying this particular frustration for weeks and I just needed to vent. Not for advice. Not for solutions. Just to say it out loud to another person. The way you do when you live with someone. The way you're supposed to be able to. I don't remember exactly what I was saying. Something about my manager not communicating clearly, and how it was affecting the whole team, and how I tried to raise it and felt dismissed. Normal work stress. The kind of thing you talk through at the dinner table every other week. And Ryan, he was on his phone. Half listening. I could see it. I kept talking anyway. Because I thought he'd re-engage. Because I'd given him that same patience 100 times. And then I said something, I think it was about asking him what he thought I should do, and he looked up from his phone with this expression. Not angry exactly. More like, irritated. Impatient. And he said, "Can you just shut up for a minute? I'm trying to think." 2 words. Well, 6 words, technically. But the 2 that hit were the ones in the middle. Shut up. I went completely still. Not because I was about to cry. Not because I was about to yell. Just, still. There's a thing that happens when someone crosses a line you didn't know you had until they cross it. Everything slows down. Goes quiet. Like your whole nervous system just hits pause. I put down my fork. I looked at him. He'd already gone back to his phone. And I said very calmly, "What did you just say to me?" He looked up again. And I saw it, the flicker. The split second where he registered that something had shifted. But instead of backtracking, instead of apologizing immediately the way a person should, he did something worse. He sighed. He actually sighed. Like I was the inconvenience. "Sophie, I'm not doing this right now. I'm stressed. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that." That sentence. I've been thinking about it ever since. Because what does that even mean? How many ways are there to mean shut up? I got up. Quietly. Took my plate to the kitchen. Washed it. Dried it. Put it away. Ryan didn't follow me. I went to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and I just stayed there for a while. Not thinking in any coherent way. More just letting the feeling settle so I could figure out what it actually was. It wasn't just hurt. It was recognition. This had been building for a long time. The sharp comments. The dismissals. The way he'd sometimes talk over me in front of other people and then act confused when I brought it up later. The low-grade feeling I'd been carrying for months. The one I kept smoothing over, explaining away, filing under "he's going through a lot right now." I'd been managing it. Quietly. By myself. And I was tired. He came to the bedroom about 20 minutes later. "Hey," he said. Standing in the doorway. "You okay?" I looked at him. No. He came and sat on the bed. Not next to me, on his side, a few feet away. "I'm sorry," I snapped. "I've just got a lot going on right now." "I know you do," I said. "I do too. That's why I was talking to you." "I know. I just... Ryan." I stopped him. "You told me to shut up. While I was talking to you about something that was bothering me. You told me to shut up and then you sighed when I reacted." He was quiet. "That's not a snap," I said. "A snap is raising your voice. A snap is being short with someone. That's something different." "I hear you," he said. Which is the thing people say when they don't want to fully agree but they've run out of pushback. "Do you?" I asked. He didn't answer that. Okay, and this is the part that I think a lot of people will recognize. When someone gives you the apology that's really just a performance of an apology. Where all the right sounds come out but nothing underneath them is real. It's one of the loneliest feelings there is. We went to sleep that night without really resolving anything. He said he was sorry 2 more times before we turned the lights off. The 3rd time he said it, he added, "I don't know why you're still making this such a big deal." I didn't respond. I lay there in the dark next to him and I thought, there it is. That's the sentence underneath all the apologies. The one that shows you what's actually true. He wasn't sorry. Not really. He was sorry I was still upset. He was sorry this hadn't been resolved faster. He was performing contrition while actually being irritated that the contrition was taking this long. That's different. That is fundamentally different. The next morning I woke up before him. Made coffee. Stood in the kitchen in the grey October light and did something I should have done a long time ago. I started paying attention. Not in a suspicious, cataloging evidence way. Just, honestly, really, genuinely paying attention to the pattern of how he treated me. Trying to see it clearly instead of through the filter of he's stressed, or it's been a hard month, or relationships are complicated. What I saw wasn't dramatic. That's the thing about this kind of thing. It almost never is. It's not one massive terrible event. It's a texture. It's 1,000 small moments of being talked over, dismissed, made to feel like your feelings were an imposition. It's the low background hum of being with someone who loves you but doesn't consistently respect you. I spent about a week in that space. Watching. Thinking. Ryan seemed to think things had gone back to normal. He was warmer that week, attentive in the slightly overcorrected way people are after an argument. Bringing me coffee. Checking in. Making an effort. And part of me wanted to let it be enough. Part of me really did. I think that's the most human part of this whole thing, honestly. The wanting to let it be enough. Because leaving is hard. And hoping is easier. At least for a while. But something had changed in me. I couldn't unfeel it. It was like a door had opened to a room I'd been keeping closed, and now that I'd looked inside, I couldn't pretend I hadn't. I started talking to my friend Danny. Not about everything, just testing the waters. Saying Ryan and I had kind of a rough week, and watching how she responded. She said, "Is this the first rough week, or?" And I laughed. But it came out wrong. Too short. And she caught it. "Sophie," she said. "Talk to me." So I did. I told her about the Thursday. About the pattern I'd been noticing. About the way I'd been managing myself around his moods for longer than I wanted to admit. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she said something I didn't expect. "Do you feel safe with him?" I started to say yes automatically. And then I stopped. "Emotionally," she clarified. "Not physically. Do you feel emotionally safe?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "Not always," I said. That conversation did something to me. It gave the thing a name. And once something has a name, you can't keep pretending it's nothing. I'm not saying what Ryan did was abuse. I want to be careful with that word because I think it means something specific and I don't want to throw it around carelessly. What I'm saying is that over 4 years, a pattern had developed where I consistently made myself smaller so he could be more comfortable. Where I chose my moments carefully. Where I monitored his mood before I decided what I was allowed to say. Where I filed away my own needs because the cost of expressing them sometimes felt too high. That's not a relationship. That's a performance. And I'd been performing for a long time. I asked Ryan if we could have a real conversation. A proper one. Not in passing, not at the end of a long day. I asked him to sit down with me on a Saturday morning when we were both rested and there was nowhere to be. To his credit, he agreed. We sat across from each other at our kitchen table. I had written some things down. Not a list, not talking points, just notes to myself so I didn't lose the thread of what I needed to say. I told him all of it. The Thursday. But also the 4 years before it. The pattern. The way I'd been shrinking. The exhaustion of it. The fact that I had been carrying something for a very long time and I hadn't been able to put it down. He listened. Really listened, this time. No phone. No sighing. He sat with his hands around his coffee cup and he listened. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. And then he said, "I didn't know it felt like that for you." And look, I believe him. I actually believe he didn't know. Which in some ways makes it more complicated, not less. Because if he knew and didn't care, that's one thing. But if he genuinely didn't notice, then what does that say? We talked for almost 2 hours that morning. He was honest, which I gave him credit for. He acknowledged the pattern. He didn't try to justify it or minimize it. He said he'd been carrying stress from work for longer than he'd admitted, and he'd been taking it out on the people closest to him, specifically me. He said he knew that wasn't okay. He said he wanted to fix it. He asked if we could try therapy. And I said yes. Not because I was sure it would work. Not because everything was suddenly fine. But because he was asking, and because the version of him sitting across from me that morning, honest, vulnerable, actually listening, was the version I'd fallen in love with. And I thought that version deserved a chance. We went to therapy for about 2 months. And I want to be honest about this, because I think people tell 2 kinds of stories about therapy. Either it fixes everything and the relationship is transformed and everyone lives happily ever after, or it confirms that nothing can be fixed and the relationship ends. And sometimes both of those things happen, but not usually in a straight line. What therapy did was give us a language. A way of talking about what was happening in real time. Ryan started to understand with help where his patterns came from. A childhood with a father who expressed stress the same way, sharp and dismissive and then silent. He started to catch himself. Not always. Not perfectly. But more. And I started to understand something about myself, too. About why I'd accepted less than I deserved for as long as I had. About the stories I'd been telling myself. About the difference between loving someone and losing yourself in the process of loving them. That second thing, the thing I learned about myself, turned out to be bigger than I expected. And honestly, That's the part of this story I didn't see coming. About 6 weeks into therapy, our therapist asked me what I wanted. Not what I wanted Ryan to do. Not what I wanted to fix. What I wanted. For my life. For my relationship. For myself. And I sat there for a moment and I genuinely didn't know. That scared me more than anything else that had happened. I'm going to be honest about the ending, because I don't want to give you something neat and comfortable that isn't real. Ryan and I are not together anymore. Not because the therapy didn't work. It did work, actually. He changed, genuinely, visibly, in ways I could see and feel. The sharpness softened. He started catching himself. He started asking me how I was doing and actually waiting for the answer. But somewhere in the process of all of it, the therapy, the conversations, the paying attention, I realized something I hadn't expected to realize. I had already let go. Not in anger. Not as a consequence of what he'd done. Somewhere in the weeks of sitting with everything, of saying out loud what had been true for years, something in me had quietly, without making a fuss, released its grip. And I don't know how to explain this except to say, sometimes you do all the work to save something, and in the process of doing the work, you discover that what you actually needed to save was yourself. We ended things on a Thursday, actually. I noticed that detail and said it out loud, and we both laughed, which felt right. He said he was sorry. The real kind, this time. I knew the difference by then. I said I was too. We hugged in the hallway of the apartment we'd shared for 2 years. I moved out 2 weeks later. My sister helped me carry boxes. We ordered pizza and sat on my new empty floor, and she didn't try to make me feel better about it. She just sat there with me, which was exactly what I needed. That was about 6 months ago. I am, for the first time in a long time, entirely myself. I sleep with the closet door open if I want to. I talk as long as I want about whatever I'm thinking about. I don't monitor my own energy before I speak. It's quieter. But it's mine. I've thought a lot about what Ryan said that night. Those 2 words. And I genuinely think, he did regret them. Not just because of what followed, but because in the middle of all the hard conversations, he said to me, I think I knew something was wrong for a long time. I just hoped if I didn't say it, it would fix itself. That's probably the most honest thing he ever said to me. Things don't fix themselves. But sometimes, if you're paying attention, they show you exactly what needs to change. And sometimes what needs to change is everything. If you're somewhere in the middle of a story like this, not at the beginning, not at the end, just sitting with something you're not sure what to do with, I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is. I don't know your story. But I'll say this. You don't have to wait for something dramatic to happen before you're allowed to pay attention. You're allowed to pay attention right now.